please don't preach to your kids what you're not living.
Right.
Because all they're going to see is you're a whole lot of this.
Yeah.
They don't follow your voice. They follow your feet.
What do you do as far as being intentional about either quality time, staying on the same page, the communication piece? What do you do to make sure that that part of your marriage stays intact?
The love wasn't there. We would just get pushed aside. And so that made it hard growing up. And also communication within the family, it was just pretty much non-existent, where I didn't feel like I could go to my parents if I was struggling with something, dealing with really hard trials, grief in my life. I just didn't feel like there was an open door with them. Mm-hmm. And that went into my adult life as well.
Equip them, encourage them, empower them. We raised our boys to be independent thinkers, to learn to think for themselves. Let them make mistakes, because when they reach adulthood, you need to stop being dad as the authority, and you need to come alongside as a friend. And he was one of my closest friends, and I love him, and I respected him, and I admired him and for who he was becoming as a man and as a follower of the Lord. And it was so hard for me to not be there. And then he's got other people that are coming around him that he's now being mentored by, and it's like, do you not need your dad anymore? And it's like, oh, that was so hard, and I couldn't say anything, because I didn't want him to feel like he was obligated to call his dad to get advice on life when he was able to have it from other people.
Welcome back to Beyond the Nest. We are happy to be. It's a good day.
It's
a really good day. I'm excited today. Yeah.
And
How are you?
it's
you look really skinny.
Oh, thank you. It's carnivore. Mm-hmm. Carnivore, and Punta Cana. Punta Cana was a great event that we hosted recently. So, it is a great day. It's going to be, I think you had mentioned before, this is an adult version, because we're going to keep it PG.
We are.
Right?
Yeah.
Which stands for pretty good. I was always told R means real good. No, never mind.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah, let's don't go there.
Okay.
Yeah.
We do get the privilege, though, of hosting a wonderful couple.
Yes.
And we'll get into a little bit of their story here in just a little bit. What is interesting that probably anybody watching this, our two sons host a really, really amazing podcast called The Deep End.
Yeah.
And man, they get into some really, really deep subjects.
Yeah.
And Taylor Welch, our son, Jake Supe is their son, and with us today is Steve and Amy Supe.
Yeah.
And they're in town because there was a massive Deep End event last night.
Yes, it was so good.
It was amazing. So if anyone's not following that, but they're following Beyond the Nest, give them a try. Yeah. They might be worth watching a little bit.
They are worth watching.
Yeah.
Yeah.
What we got to visit with them just really for the first time.
Yes.
I met Steve a few years back, briefly. We got to have a Zoom meeting with them to get to know them a little bit better, knowing that we're going to be able to visit today. What was, since they're here, we go way
We're
back.
going to talk about them for a minute.
Yeah, we are. What were your takeaways?
Okay, so first of all, I'm going to say this. Like, it's really cool finding another couple that has raised 3 boys, because that's a dynamic that not everybody lives in.
And survived.
Yeah. And so I feel like there's automatic camaraderie. She may not feel it, but I kind of feel like we're BFFs because of that. But no, I love that about them. Mm-hmm. And here's another thing that stands out to me. They have raised 3 boys. Their boys are younger than our boys because they're younger than we are, too.
Yes, they are.
But their boys are high functioning, high performing kids.
Yeah.
Like Jake produces our show. I mean, they've got 2 other boys that are, they're paving their own way and they're paying their way, and they're not just living off mom and dad's dime, living in the basement. I think that's significant. And, knowing a little bit about where they come from, I feel like there's this respect for, you guys didn't stay stuck. You did the work to do what you're doing today. You're investing in other couples. You're turning things around and pouring into the next generation.
Yeah. I think there's a very similar vision. We haven't really talked about what their family vision is, but it's a very similar vision of equipping and resourcing others.
Yeah.
Whether it's other couples or the next generation.
Yeah.
and being able to hear a little bit about their story. One of the things you had mentioned is anything is possible.
Yeah.
That can mean any number of things, but when I think about from their perspective, they've got a very unique story from their upbringing.
Yep.
And they had a choice to make. They could either continue the pattern that was modeled for them, or they could choose to do something differently.
Yeah.
And obviously they chose a different path.
Yeah.
And being able to invest in, and yes, the fact that they've got 3 boys, that resonates.
Yep.
Not just that, but they're doing well.
Yeah.
They're creating their own mark in a positive way.
Yeah.
And I've told you the story before, but when you hear people that had a challenging upbringing and they have to make a choice when they begin to enter adulthood, what path are they going to take? It is always a perspective shift when you get to hear people's personal stories.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm looking forward to getting to have you share your stories. But I've told you the story before about these 2 boys that grew up in a very dysfunctional alcoholic home. And when they got older, they both had a choice to make. One of the boys vowed to never, ever be like his dad. He was not going to be an alcoholic or abusive. He was not going to be creating chaos and dysfunction. When you asked him about why do you not drink, he said, well, I grew up in an alcoholic home and that was not going to be my story. The other boy, he actually did follow in his father's footsteps. And when you ask him why he is like he is, well, I grew up in an alcoholic home. So both boys grew up in the exact same home. One vowed to not repeat the pattern. Mm-hmm. The other one used it as an excuse or a crutch.
The whole thing of attribution.
Yeah.
So, yeah, that's so true. And I think that the crux of the issue for us is always bringing hope to people.
Yeah.
I feel like they embody hope. And so that's what we're bringing today.
So maybe we can get into, I definitely want to hear your story to the extent that you're willing to peel back some of those layers. Talk about what did you do intentionally to begin to equip and resource your boys? And, we'll get into maybe even some of the empty nest conversations, because all 3 of ours are well into the empty nest. You've got one that is completely out of the nest, and the others are kind of semi out, but you're still providing some shelter at least.
Tell us how it all began. Yeah.
So I grew up in a very abusive, dysfunctional home. One of the things that I say, to your point, where you're talking about, I grew up that way, right? And so that I look at it like this: you can either be defined by your childhood or be refined by your childhood.
That's good.
And I chose to be refined, to not be a victim. That was a big thing for me. And I think because my childhood was so chaotic, and because my childhood was so it was just as an example, okay, my parents would discipline us with a 6-foot leather dog leash.
Wow.
So spankings were not spankings. They were basically being whipped,
Floggings.
quite frankly.
Yeah.
And my mom was very controlling, very domineering. My dad was not a strong man. He was a very passive person. And so it was difficult because my mom would do things just to set people against each other in the house and so on and so forth. But I realized when we went to Hawaii a couple of years ago that the movie Rocky that came out in 1974 was actually one of the anchor points for my life, in the sense that you see this man overcoming these unbelievable odds and surviving. And I was able to take inspiration from that to realize that what I'm growing up in doesn't have to be my life. I chose to be, I'm not going to be like my mom. I'm not going to be like my dad. We grew up very, very poor. We were married for probably 15 years before I would stop finishing my plate, because I didn't know where our next meal was coming from growing up. So when you ate everything that you were given, because you didn't know when you were going to eat next.
Yeah.
So, grew up very, very poor. My mom was sexually abused and physically abused by her dad. My dad was raised in a Catholic boarding school because of his childhood. His dad had threatened my grandmother, and she fled with my father, and he grew up with a massive abandonment issues that were traumatic to the point where he never overcame them. And so they met, got married, and had kids. And by the grace of God, I came to faith in Christ at 18. And I was the first person saved in my family. And just
How many children?
5 boys.
5 boys.
I was number 2, number 3, meaning I was a twin. And so I'm larger than my other brother. So people would think that he was my younger brother when he was actually 4 minutes older and it was my twin. And then I had a brother who was 4 years older than me. And then 2 younger brothers who were born when I was 12 and 15. And I basically raised them.
I'm curious, what happened at 18 that triggered that relationship?
So my parents, who have both passed by this time, my mom and my dad was very seriously considering or had stepped out on my mom. And so they're on the brink of divorce. My dad went for counseling, and he saw a Christian counselor, and he told my dad, look, you think that these are all your problems. Your real problem is that you need Christ. You know, you've sinned against God. You need a new start. You need to get right with God. And my dad claims that he surrendered his life to Christ. And the reason why I say he claimed is because he never really lived it. I think he had an emotional conversion, not a real conversion, and a very distorted conversion. And what I mean by that is that this happened when I was like 9. And so I've got 8 or 9 year old myself, my twin brother, and then my 12 or 13-year-old older brother. And my dad offers us his porn collection as a newly established Christian. You know? And so yet my parents would watch the 700 Club on TV, and my dad worked 3:30 to midnight. So you can imagine, I get up in the morning on my own, see myself off to school, come home, my dad's calling to work, and I don't see him, you know, except for he worked, he was off Thursdays and Saturdays. So I would see him Thursday evenings during Saturday, and then Saturday and Sunday morning from about noon until 3 o'clock until he left for work. And so they'd watch the 700 Club, and it changed time slots. So in the changing of the time slot, they decided to set the VCR to record, and recorded the next 6 hours of TV after they went to bed about 3 o'clock in the morning. And they caught Jimmy Swaggart to study in the Word. And so during the study in the Word, he would, you know, have the promotions for his weekend crusades. And so I would watch the weekend crusades. And that was really my first real exposure to Christianity. And I basically had decided, you know, if I were to become a Christian, I wanted to be like that. Long story short, I know, too late. Long story short, I learned that Jimmy Swaggart was of the Assemblies of God denomination. I looked up in the phone book, found the Assemblies of God church where I lived, and asked my mom if we could drive by there on the way to taking dad to work or whatever. And they just happened to have an evangelist preaching there all week. And so I rode my bike there, and because no one else would go.
So you were kind of a latchkey kid.
Kind of.
In the sense of,
well, I
you
mean,
just were home alone and did your own thing. And
well, we weren't home alone, but my mom literally would get up, sit on the couch. We would bring her coffee, make her food, bring her cigarettes, empty her ashtrays.
Out of fear? Or just because you just
That's
did it?
what was expected. I mean, when we got married, I wanted to be around her family because for me, her family was really normal. I mean, for me, it was weird. Just to give you the context, to me, it was weird to go into someone's house and go into their bathroom and not see porn there. Because there was porn all over the house growing up. I mean, it was just so anyway, going back. So I went that night. The pastor preached a gospel message. Of course, the evangelist preached a gospel message, and I went forward and gave my life to Christ. And you know, I was going to church 5 nights a week, and then a few years later, I moved to Florida, and through a series of events, ended up getting a job at a company called Risk Corp Insurance, which is now under a different name. And while I was there, that's where I met this lovely lady. And we were friends for almost 2 years. And then one night the light bulb went on and I was like, I need to date this girl. And
Took you 2 years for that?
the light didn't go. God,
Wow.
it wasn't God's timing. But we,
Well, I was a lot younger.
she was 20.
Yeah.
I was 27. She was 20. I was 27.
Well, you
We got
met me
married.
when I was 18.
Right. Yeah.
So,
And so we started dating December 27th of 1994. January 27th, 1 month later, I asked her to marry me after I had asked her dad if I could marry his daughter. And then 4 months later, we were married.
Okay, so you did speed it up. It just took a while.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
We don't believe in long engagements.
Okay. Well, two completely pointless things that I took out of your little talk.
Pointless?
These are you'll understand why it's pointless. You lost some of our folks when you said you had a VCR
Yes.
and you looked up an address in a phone book.
Yes.
Right.
Wow.
Well, I mean, I'm not as old as you, Lance, but I mean, back in our days of youth, we did not have internet back then.
We did not.
Oh, we did
We did
not.
not.
I mean, we even had the Dewey Decimal System in the library.
Yeah.
Oh yeah.
Can
Well, that
finding
still
books.
exists.
Yes, it does.
Yeah.
That's
But-
funny.
So that's a very short synopsis of my childhood. My parents did not divorce, but there are more broken marriages in my family tree than there are solid marriages.
Yeah.
Unfortunately, not. I'm sure that doesn't surprise anybody.
Yeah.
It's. I think it's that statement could be accurate for the vast majority of our culture.
Yeah,
We'll come back and dig into some of these stories because I want to hear more about what made you decide you were going to be parenting differently. But let's go ahead and turn it over to Amy.
so I grew up in a Christian home, and my dad was in ministry his whole life. But unfortunately, I felt like ministry was put first, and so I didn't feel like family was first. And so I felt like me and the siblings, we suffered from that, and the love wasn't unconditional. So, I mean, there were a lot of great things growing up. My mom she was a good mom. She loved us all. My dad loved us all too. It's just when we weren't living the way that he wanted us to, the love wasn't there. We would just get pushed aside. And so that made it hard growing up, and also communication within the family. It was just pretty much non-existent, where I didn't feel like I could go to my parents if I was struggling with something, dealing with really hard trials, grief in my life. I just didn't feel like there was an open door with them. And so I just felt very shut down as a kid. And that went into my adult life as well. So I definitely, in my mind, when Steve and I got married, I said, I want to have good communication with my kids, because I want them to know that if they're going through something really difficult, that we're here. And the number one thing that I feel like we did is, if it didn't matter what they told us, I made it a point to not have a reaction.
Yeah.
It's just like they're saying, oh, I had a good day at school. Oh, okay. Because I didn't want them to run away. I didn't want them to feel like, oh, I'll never do that again. And so we always made it a point to tell our boys, no matter what you're going through, we're here and we're going to listen. And we want to help you along that journey.
Yeah.
And so, yes, our boys haven't come to us about everything, but they have come to us about really important stuff.
Yeah.
And I understand that, kids are always going to want to talk to their friends and other peers, and they'll hear things that we say and they'll hear it from other people, and it'll be something totally different. That's totally understandable. But I am grateful that all of our boys have come to us with really important things, and just trying to respond in a right way. And, it's okay to say, I'm really disappointed to hear that you did that, but I want you to know that I love you and I'm always here for you, because to me, that made such a difference that our kids felt that way.
Yeah.
Because I never had that. And I grew up I had two, what would have been sisters, but, they came in early, like at 26 weeks, and they passed away. And that was a really hard time in my life. And so I never had a sister. And I experienced going to the funerals when I was young. I was 6 and then 7. And I don't ever remember having a conversation with my parents about it.
Oh, wow.
To help go through that grief.
Oh, wow.
And so it was always stuffed. And it wasn't until my adult life that, because I would go back to Minnesota where I grew up, and that's where they're buried. And so I would visit my lifelong friend, and I would always say, I want to go back to the gravesite. And I probably went 3 or 4 times and brought flowers until I knew, okay, I've gotten through that trauma. Because that was like such a major thing, because my mom almost passed away because she had a stillborn with the first one. And so she was in bed for a month. My dad didn't know how to cook. He bought a microwave. That's when they first came out. And, I didn't know if my mom was going to make it.
Yeah.
And I don't ever remember talking to my dad. It was just kind of like, we were just left to deal with it on our own.
Yeah.
Because we knew that my dad was going through it and he was trying to pick up the pieces. I had a much younger brother. He was a baby at the time. I'm sorry, he wasn't born yet. That's right. He came later. But
So you have an older brother.
yes, I have an
Then
older
you-
brother, and then my younger brother's 9 months younger. So he came premature,
Okay.
and we didn't think he was going to make it. So when he came, I felt like I was kind of on my own, because it was like, oh, he made it. And then all the attention was with him. And I just grew up where I felt like I was pretty independent. I did my schooling on my own. I was just kind of on my own.
Yeah.
So
It's interesting that you both were kind of on your own, but in completely different
yeah,
environments. Like
Yeah.
probably hyper religious
it was very legalistic.
and amoral, whatever. You like nothing.
Yeah, nothing.
No, my parents were,
yeah.
the way I describe my parents is God-hating liberal atheists.
Yeah.
That's literally how they lived.
Yeah.
It's funny because I just became a conservative in my teen years, even though my parents were very, very liberal,
Yeah. What I'm curious, what
Yeah.
denomination? Like you said, your dad was a pastor. What
Non-denominational.
non-denominational? Ooh, yikes.
Yeah.
So you were raised in the Plymouth Brethren, though.
Yeah. So when I was younger, my dad, it was a very conservative church. So head coverings, 2 services, one
Okay.
without music, the first service.
So that makes a little more sense
Yeah.
to me. And I'm just going to say this. I love reading Amish fiction.
yeah.
I have this strange obsession with my ideal of the Amish lifestyle and all. And in one of the books I just read, of course it's fiction, but these people research before they write these books. And there was a twin brother. He lost his twin brother to a house fire, and everybody, like in this Amish book, like they just kind of move on like nothing happened.
Yeah.
And when you were talking, I was like, that is oddly reminiscent of what I just read
Yeah.
about this loss of this child. It's like they believe the will of God is the will of God, and you don't question it, and to question it is pride and it's sin. But yet,
Yeah.
how do you work through those emotions when your own parents don't help
Right.
you navigate them?
Yeah.
That's just sad to me.
So when did it become, for either one of you, become apparent that you were going to do things differently? You'd mentioned that you wanted your boys to know XYZ, but at what point was it in your married life or even before marriage did you decide I'm going to be different?
Yeah, I'm not going to repeat these patterns.
I think it was shortly after we got married, just because I always lived at home. And so I lived at home and then it went right into married life. And so still being at home and in that environment, it wasn't until I was out where I realized, I'm with my husband, this is different. And just kind of reflecting on my childhood of the whole thing with communication. And I mean, things didn't start to open up until over the years, like realizing just some of the dysfunctionalities. But the communication, I think, was the first thing of just wanting that communication. Because like Steve said, when we first got married, I brought baggage, he brought baggage, and we had to work through a lot. We had some counseling, and we just knew that we were fighters. Like, we're going to fight for a good marriage because we want to make this. And we knew that we wanted children, but we didn't want to have children right away because we were trying to work through those things. And then it took me a little while to have my first, but
so how long were you married before you?
So it was like a little over 5 years before our first one came.
Yeah.
And then we were still working through things.
Oh yeah.
So
because when we first had Jake, I got to realize how much control and manipulation was still in operation in me. I was, quite frankly, not a good husband and not a good father in our early years. I was very hard to deal with. I was very stubborn, very rebellious, and because of all the garbage from my childhood and not knowing how to have a relationship, I just repeated a lot of the things that I had grown up with. And I was like, wait a minute, this is not what I want, And so it wasn't one of those moments as a child I said, I don't want to be like this when I get older. But I was like, I'm becoming this and I don't want that. And it took us a long time to figure out how to stop fighting each other to start fighting for each other and start fighting for our marriage and fighting for our kids. Some of that fighting had to deal with fighting our own inner issues of like, well, this is my fleshly pattern. This is what is my norm. This is my default. I want to go do this, right? The Bible says that death and life are in the power of the tongue. And a lot of times people say it in the reverse. They say life and death. It's not. It's death and life because our default is death. It takes the Spirit of God for us to speak life. And one of the things that we've been very passionate about is speaking over our kids, good things. When every one of our children were, when she was pregnant, I would lay hands on her and we would pray over the baby and proclaim blessings over them. And we've seen that come to pass with our boys. And so that's a big piece of the puzzle for us is speaking life over people.
You took the Bible literally, and just did what it said.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. Proverbs is a big one when it comes to the raising children.
And also really trying to encourage them too, and to tell them to do their best.
Yeah.
Don't just try to skate through things, but do your best.
Right.
And we said, if all you can get is our C's, that's fine. We weren't the parents of, if you don't get A's, you're going to be grounded, you're going to be in trouble. But we knew the potential with our boys because when they started going to school, they were getting straight A's. We could see it. We knew they were very smart. And so just being intentional to just encourage them in that and get good grades. And when we could see when they were slacking and when they weren't, but.
And I love that because I feel like your encouragement of them in their effort instead of just performance.
Yes.
Like, to me, kind of is a nod to like your upbringing, not wanting to repeat some of the same things that you grew up in that performative, home. So
yeah,
that's amazing.
Yeah. Cause encouragement goes a long way. And I didn't grow up with that. It was more negative than positive of, well, you did this wrong, or not wanting to encourage because, well, that's pride. I don't want to instill pride in you. And there's a balance of having to find that, of how much do you say to your kids?
Right.
But I feel like it's almost like you can't say enough sometimes because they need it,
Yeah.
you know?
Well, it
Yeah.
says in the book of Proverbs, raise up a child in the way he should go, and when he is older, he will not depart from it. And a lot of people misunderstand that verse to mean raise up your children in the Christian faith, and when they get older, they won't depart from their Christian faith. Well, actually, that's not what that verse means at all. It means to study your child to see their bent and then nurture that bent. And that's what we sought to do. And so some children, like with discipline, some children you have to really like deal with it. Other times you can just, hey, we don't do that. Right?
Yeah.
And same thing when it comes to encouragement. It's like, look, I know that you're not giving it your best at school. Or it's like, hey, I know you're trying. Is there any way we can help? And that was another thing too, is we always sought to come alongside them, equip them,
Yeah.
encourage them, empower them. We raised our boys to be independent thinkers,
Yeah.
to learn to think for themselves. Let
Yeah.
them make mistakes.
Yeah.
One of our boys wanted to start a little business with a friend, and I was like, great, let's hear the idea. Sounds good. Okay. I'm a little concerned because what I'm seeing in this friend of yours, I don't think they're going to run at your pace. And I think you're going to end up having some problems. And they wanted to go forward anyway. And you know what I do? I let them, because that's what you do. You have
That's how they learn.
sometimes the best
Yeah,
lessons
exactly.
are by letting them fail.
Yeah.
You know, and I didn't go, and don't be the dad that says, see, I told you so.
Right.
Yeah.
You know,
Right.
no, just say, hey, it's all right. It's
I
all right.
know.
You learn
Yeah.
from it, and you move forward.
Yeah.
And that's to me is another big thing is, when it comes to communication. I've told my kids, I've told some of the married couples in the young married couples group that we're currently leading, repent and move on.
Yeah.
Don't sit there and wallow. It doesn't do anything for you. It
Yeah.
only hinders you.
Yeah.
Repent and move forward. Just
Yeah.
keep moving forward.
Yeah.
Well, along that, the other thing that we did a lot of is when we messed up, because we messed up a lot.
Oh yeah.
We would sit our boys down and tell them how we were wrong, how we were very sorry, and ask for their forgiveness.
Yeah.
And that I know that they remembered, like, that's very important that you do that, because you're going to mess up. You're not going to be perfect.
Yeah.
So,
And they know. Like, I remember we had we called those
Yeah.
kind of Jesus meetings, where,
Yeah.
and it was usually me because we homeschooled, and we had one room downstairs, and we would all gather on this little bed when they were little, and I would have to repent for losing my temper or for yelling or
Yeah.
for whatever it was. And 9 times out of 10, they were like, they didn't know, they didn't remember, or they didn't,
Yeah.
like, because kids are so forgiving. But
Yeah.
I remember thinking, I need you to see that I answer to the same
Right.
God that I'm trying to get you connected to. It's not, I'm not lording over you.
right.
This is who I serve too. And to make that correlation,
Yeah.
So,
No, that's great.
and another thing, when you were talking about letting your kids fail, I feel like there's so much in parenting tied to our own insecurities. Like, how many times do we not want our kids to fail because it hits at our pride, our ego, our fearing that, oh, this is going to reflect so poorly on me as a parent. And that's just,
It's image.
it is.
It's image. And tied right to that, going back to raising up a child and the way he should go, we've known people that have practically destroyed their kids because they've chosen to try to live vicariously through their kids.
Yeah.
Well, I couldn't do this, so I want you to do this.
Yeah.
Or, placing limitations on their kids. Well, I mean, I was a garbage man growing up. Isn't that good enough for you?
Yeah.
And it's like, part of me is like, how dare you hold back your child
I know.
out of your own pride, out of your own desire for them to. My boys, every one of my boys are further ahead in life, maturity, and in their walk with the Lord. And I mean every one of those areas separately than I was at their given ages.
Yeah.
Every one of them.
Yeah. And isn't that how it's supposed to be? That's what you want.
Well, it's what
Because
you
I want to
want.
rejoice in
Right.
that.
Absolutely.
I don't want my boys to carry the garbage
No.
that I carried into my marriage. I don't want them to carry any of that kind of stuff into their marriage, which is like to her point of making things right. And sometimes if kids don't feel safe to open up, I would be like, look, I know I screwed up as a dad. Is there anything I've done that has hurt you?
Yeah.
Well, no, Dad, I'm good. Like, look, I know when I did this, when I said this, when I acted this way, when I, whatever it is, right? And then you start peeling back your own onion of like, hey, these are areas where I know I failed you.
Yeah.
That can open up the door for them to talk to you.
Yeah.
And then make it right. Ask forgiveness. Oh my gosh. I mean, we've met so many people where they're like, my dad never said I was sorry. And I was like, oh, it breaks my heart.
I know.
Breaks my heart.
Because sometimes that's all they need.
Yeah.
Exactly.
You just need some sort of acknowledgement that,
Right.
you did it the wrong way. And
Just think about this two pieces. One is that when you encourage them in their giftings and in their passions and their interests, it empowers them. And then when you have and you treat them with honor, to honor the way they're made and to honor them enough to say, I'm sorry.
yeah.
Right? Encouragement and honoring are two huge tools that just are not used. They're almost lost on our culture entirely now.
Well, what I've loved to listen to and picking up over the last few minutes is there are so many similarities between the way you chose to raise your boys and what we did. And I've always heard that success leaves clues. There is no exact cookie cutter template, but it does leave clues. And what I love now, I'm going to point out some things that you have shared that you did, because it's easier for me to brag on you and what you've done well. And then I want to hear more about when the boys got older, what you did. But these are some of the things that we did. And it always feels weird to say, well, look what we did. But I'm loving to say, well, look what you guys did. All right. So the first one you brought up was just a consistent encouragement. Our discussion was the world will do enough to drag them down.
Yeah.
They don't need to come home and get it too.
They don't want to be torn down at home too.
Right. So the home was the safe place. When you create the safe place, they will communicate. We've talked a lot about that. So I love the fact that you were just a constant encourager. And the way you explained it was, how was your day? Oh, it was good. Oh, great. How was your day? It sucked. Oh, okay. It was like you were just very steady in creating that safe zone so that they did feel comfortable that, oh, I can't say this to mom or to dad because they'll
melt down or they'll spin out.
Or they'll overreact or, I don't want to trigger them. The other one you had mentioned was you intentionally created independent thinking. So I want you to be thinking about what did you do intentionally for that, because I want to come back on that one because I think that's one of the biggest missing links for young adults. Well, actually, any adult, right?
We've seen that in the last 5 years.
Well, we're grown adults, and like you, we've done so many hiring and firing over the years. Independent thinking is an absolute skill that wasn't taught unless the parents got involved. So that's one. The fact that you're always loved, right? It doesn't matter what you do. And that was one thing that I credit you with saying all the time. It doesn't matter what you do. You're always going to have a seat at the table.
Yeah.
You can never do anything that would cause me not to love you.
Yeah.
Exactly.
I remember holding their little faces in my hand and telling them, you'll never, ever do anything so bad to make me stop loving you, ever.
Yeah.
Just such a reassurance for that.
Yeah.
The other one that you mentioned was it's okay to apologize.
Yeah.
It's actually responsible parenting
Yes,
will
it is.
acknowledge that, hey, I didn't handle that well.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. And you're right. You had to do that a whole lot more than me.
Because I made so many more mistakes.
You were home more.
I was home with them all
She
the
had
time.
more opportunity. Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Not
Right.
that I did things right. You just were there more.
Yeah.
Got it. The other thing you had mentioned is the recognizing their unique bent. That is, and whether it's in their skills, their personality, their emotional quotient, We had one that to discipline them, you really had to get strong to do the disciplining.
We'll let you guess which one that is.
Others, it was like, you know what, like you said, that's not the way you respond. And you can see their heart just begin to melt.
Yeah.
One, we'd punish them or part of the consequence was we'd send them to the room by themselves. That was torture. Another one, we did that was
a day off.
Right. They loved it. So you had to understand the unique bent.
Yeah.
One thing from the workforce is early days, we were commanded basically to treat everyone the same. There was something inside me intuitively that told me that was not appropriate. You cannot treat everyone the same, right? Everyone has a different personality style, and you cannot treat the same as at home. You cannot treat your children exactly the same.
Do you know what I think, though? I think that you can have like a template of basic.
Well, that's where I was headed. The patterns.
Yeah.
That for anyone that's listened to this, that you're a parent and you still have kids at home, look at these 4 things.
Yeah.
And think about how can you implement more of that? Because if we look at your sons, they're well-adjusted, high functioning, productive members of society at a very young age. That is awesome. So that's what the whole point of that was. Success leaves clues.
Yeah.
And if you recognize something in a family, and this is way off topic, but when I very first started in sales, the sales manager said, if the number one salesman in this agency says he does it because he wears polka dot boxers and stands on his table every morning, he said, by God, you better get you some polka dot boxers and start standing on the table
every morning.
Bottom line, his message was success leaves clues.
Yeah.
And so when we look at, not that you've done everything perfect, I know you would refute that, right? You've already had to talk about the apologies times, but I'd love to hear any thoughts that you have on the intentional thinking, or I'm sorry, independent thinking that you talked about.
So very early on, I stumbled upon this catechism called Prove It. And so the whole purpose of the catechism was to make a statement and then be able to provide the Bible verse that proves that, right? God created the heavens and the earth. Prove it. Genesis chapter 1, verse 1. In the beginning, God created the heavens and the earth. And it goes, there's like all these questions. And then I also was listening to a podcast where they always talked about it's one thing to know what you believe. It's another thing is to know why you believe it. And so we would teach the boys, well, why is that important?
Basic apologetics.
Basic apologetics, but basic apologetics applies in everything when it comes to, well, why do you want to date that girl? Why do you want to do this career? How will you be successful at it? Because we have gone to a society of creating worker bees, of saying this is what you need to know instead of why you should know it.
Yeah.
And why you should think about what you're doing. And so that's a big thing. But what to go to another point that you said about success leaves clues, our boys were raised in a home where we live by faith. And so not long after we got married, I kind of joined the family business and became a painting contractor. And there are times where there was one morning in particular, my brother was living with us. He was working for me, and he came out of his room. We're sitting down to breakfast. He's like, what are we doing for work today? I said, we don't have any work today, but we have a bid. And we literally went and did the bid, closed the job, went to the paint store and started. And so there were times where the provision of God was like swinging out on a vine, and there's the next vine. And our boys saw that. And so they saw this union between faith and provision. And one of the things that I think is so important is to remember that a vocational calling is important. In the Christian world, we always think about, well, I want to be in ministry. Well, your first ministry is to your spouse.
Yeah.
Your second ministry is to your children. Your third ministry is your vocation. And then Christian ministry is after that. Yeah. And so going to work and working it hard as unto the Lord, was something that we modeled. Please don't preach to your kids what you're not living.
Right.
Because all they're going to see is you're a whole lot of this.
Yeah.
And your feet, they don't follow your voice. They follow your feet.
Yeah.
You know?
Well, the verse that came to mind on that is faith without works is dead. So you could have just said, we're going to wait for a call to come in. I used to tell my agents, you cannot just sit and aggressively wait for the phone to ring. That is not that's not a good work ethic. But you had a bid, you went out, you were doing the works, but your faith was driving that.
Yeah.
So I love that.
Yeah, that's good. I love that, because I think so many kids nowadays that like get up and leave the home, they expect to step right into the standard of living that their parents had. And if you roll back the hands of time and you look, like, our kids don't know because they weren't there. Like, they didn't experience the days when, you know, I'm like mashing sweet potatoes and that was
For
literally
baby
the
food.
only baby food we had.
Yeah.
Or, you know, like there's so many hard times that not all kids have to go through and live through. And then I wonder, does that handicap their faith? You know, I don't know.
Well, you know, when we first got married, now granted, it was just almost 30 years ago. You know, I was making $8.50 an hour. You know, and I knew I couldn't support a wife and kids and have her be a stay-at-home mom on that income. So that's why I started my own painting business. You know, so that entrepreneurial piece was kind of forced into my life because out of necessity. But I just lost my train of thought. I hate it when that happens. But
Because you're old.
yes, it is.
You're talking about living by faith, like the
Yeah,
abundance
and-
times and
Yeah.
the lean times.
Yeah, thank you.
Yeah.
So
It's because she's younger.
yes, exactly.
She remembers.
I still have a brain.
Yeah. Wow. If I only had a
Yeah.
brain. So anyway, yes, we had really lean times, and when we bought the business that we have now, things went really, really sideways with that business. And 7 years ago, we literally thought we were going to lose everything. I mean, it was literally around this time, 7 years ago, I was sitting at the breakfast table with a bagel, like thinking, maybe I should go on a 4-day fast because I don't know if I'm going to be able to provide for my kids. I mean, it was that bad. I mean, we're thinking we're going to lose our home, our cars, because we had taken out an SBA loan to buy an existing business. Well, if the SBA forecloses on you, from what I understand, you lose. If your cars are worth more than $5,000, they will take your cars, make you sell them. They'll
Wow.
take your home, everything. And I thought we were going to lose everything 7 years ago. And we did not hide from our boys the trial that we were going through. She is a prayer warrior. And she would tell our boys, you wait and see that how God will deliver our family.
Yeah, I knew during that time that there was no doubting. It was like life or death every time. Every morning I woke up, it was a choice. I would drive the kids to school. They went to a private school. I'd drop them off. And when I dropped them off, that was my time in the car to pray, scream, cry, whatever I needed to do to find peace and joy that day.
Yeah.
And I didn't always have joy every day, but I knew that if I didn't do that, that I would go insane, you know, and it was the Lord just grounding me every day. And that year in 2018 was the most powerful year, the best year. And when we were going through it and I did not know if we were going to lose everything, I would tell people, if I have to go through this all over again, I will, because I was seeing miracles happen. I was seeing not business stuff, like relationships be restored. I saw just the faith that was rising up in me, trusting the Lord. And I was in such a place with the Lord, it's like, if I'll do it all over again, like I don't know, that year I learned sacrifice at a whole nother level. And being able to tell the boys that that God was going to move, because I knew that if I doubted, that it'd all be gone.
Yeah.
We would lose it. And so just having to stand strong, and we would have people tell us, well, I guess you're going to have to hire a bankruptcy attorney. And I looked at them and I said, No, we're not. We're standing and believing with people that are praying with us that God's going to move the mountain. And I said, you watch and see. And all of our boys can tell their perspective on that year and the testimony, because God so provided. And we were just talking the other day. I honestly don't know how the bills were paid. I don't know. We didn't go into debt. We didn't, rack up a bill with our credit card. We just knew from other lean times of, you just don't go out to eat. You just don't do certain things. And until the kids need clothes, then we'll go get clothes. But we were not out doing any extracurricular. It was just, we're just surviving every single day.
Yeah.
So, but the kids' faith grew from that. I know, they saw that God is real. God's going to provide. God is a faithful God. And it helped their faith.
Yeah, for sure.
So,
Another thing that I think about you guys is I feel like a lot of women are really self-aware, but I think both of you are super self-aware people, and I think because of that, you've raised really self-aware. Well, I don't know your other boys. I just know Jake, but he's very self-aware. And that's, I feel like, is a little, I don't want to say unusual, because there are young men that are self-aware, but it's more common probably for women than it is for men. And I think that is an attribution to both of you, that you haven't hidden things. You've been all in and open with your kids, and it's yielded wonderful, wonderful things in the fruit of your children, So amazing.
yeah, I never wanted them to grow up in a bubble, because I didn't want them to move out and then possibly have to move in. Not that I wouldn't want that. I miss them. I miss Jake horribly when he left. But you want your kids to leave and then start their own life. So
on that note, when Jake left, because you guys kind of have a...
Can you table that? Because that's jumping it. I do have a question for you, because you made a statement that said, I was almost forced into being an entrepreneur. Okay, so you went from $850 an hour, went into entrepreneurship. Did that frame any of your personal coaching with your boys on? Because I'm always careful. I don't want to.
Absolutely.
I don't want to speak negative about an hourly wage job, because that is honorable work. It's willing to work.
Absolutely.
But I used to use that with the boys as this. You can't provide a family on that. So I always talked about it. You either had to be in sales or ownership. So it gave a launch pad. Did you use that on any intentional coaching with your boys?
So actually, I'll go two different directions with that. One is that when I owned my painting business, I did not know that I could lead a crew, lead teams. I was basically pushed into, and those giftings were in me, and I didn't know that they were there. Okay. And so I was able to be a self-starter, which is a big deal. You won't find success as an entrepreneur if you cannot make yourself get out and do those things that you don't want to do. That's all part of it.
Yep.
But then I started a property preservation business with two other guys, and I ended up overseeing 150 crews that we had. And so I learned, okay, I can lead as well. I didn't even know that I had leadership skills. And one of the reasons why I think it's so important to study your children to see how they're bent. Because all of my boys, not only are they independent thinkers and well-rounded, but they're also all leaders in their own way. And so to go back to your question, I think coaching is a massively powerful thing. We were coaches for our boys cross country team, and we had some really good runners in the class. And we're talking kids as little as 9, right? They're running 2 miles a couple times a week, have weekly meetings, weekly meets. And then I saw, hey, there's an event coming up. There's a 5K, a 10K, and a half marathon. Would any of you guys be interested in doing a half marathon? We took 4 boys, including our son Nate, and 1 girl to a half marathon. None of them had ever run more than 2 or 3 miles at that point, including a 9-year-old boy. And we took 3 parents one of which had run a half marathon. The other one had never run more than 4 miles. And all of us completed the half marathon. I had my best finishing time in the half marathon, and the boys placed first, second, third, and fourth in their age group, and the girl won hers. But I learned the power of a coach when we did triathlon, because we're both Ironman finishers of the Ironman triathlon. And so there's a huge coaching aspect as parents that I think that we can't shy away from that work.
Yeah.
To try to coach our kids. Like when I was talking earlier about one of our sons wanting to start a business, coach them. Well, how can you do this? And what can you do better? And how would you, whatever the different things are, how can you come alongside your child and help them to be successful and help launch them into success with business?
Yeah.
Yeah.
I'll make one statement on that and then I'll turn it over to you. The reason, not that it's valid, but the reason I think most parents don't is they've worked all day, they're tired. It would be a massively inconvenient role to take on to come alongside. But I've always said that if you aren't willing to be inconvenienced there, that you'll be greatly inconvenienced when they won't move out, can't move out, or they're having to move back. Like you, we'll take them back in a heartbeat. We love having our boys around. But I'm either going to be inconvenienced right now as the dad that wants to come alongside, or I will be have a greater inconvenience later when they haven't learned what they could have learned if I would have been willing to be
You pay now or you
inconvenienced.
pay later.
Right.
Yeah.
That's
And
very
the way I taught it to my boys, and I can guarantee you, Jake is probably thinking about, I know he's going to say sowing and reaping. God is not mocked. A man will reap what he sows. And so if you sow into your children, confidence, ability to think, inspiration, encouragement, direction, that they help to bring to fruition the direction that they're trying to go in.
Yeah.
Right? Like Jake had an aspiration for music. And so we got him guitar lessons. And he really wasn't practicing because he wanted to quit. And so we talked to his teacher and I said, look, Jake is a very big fan of Jeremy Camp. So teach him some of his songs, because that was Jake's bent in music was Jeremy Camp. And then he started practicing and learning how to play Jeremy Camp songs. And then he taught himself how to play the piano, and now he's teaching himself how to play the cello. It's amazing what I believe that there are people out there that could be absolutely prolific NFL players, but because they don't like the sport, they don't know. Right? There could be absolutely amazing athletes out there, but they don't know. Or there could be amazing people that could be world leaders, but they're playing video games because no one has sought to come alongside them and inspire.
Out.
Right, exactly. Pull it out of them, inspire them. That to me is the biggest thing that we have done with our kids that I think has been very, very fruitful.
Yeah.
Well, not only that, but having them do the hard things when they don't want to do it.
Yeah.
Oh yeah, we taught them responsibility early on.
With school projects of maybe they didn't have to do something, but this was extra credit. Well, do the extra credit, go the extra mile. And that was a lot of what we would try to instill in our kids. And then having chores at home, responsibilities. If we had yard day, they were all out there. And he's laughing because I'm tough. And so
are you the bad cop and he's the good cop, or are you
sometimes it depends on what it is, but we had a big yard day one day.
I was training for a marathon and I was out running 18 miles. And she said, I want to change out. I want to refresh the mulch in the yard.
And I was going to just do it with the kids. I said, I'll go get the mulch. I came back. The car was full of mulch and I got the boys. We went out and then I realized, this is a different color. What do I do? And so I went in. He had already run 18 miles. He had had an ice bath. He's sitting on the chair. And I said, you don't need to help, but I just need you to show me what I need to do. So he came out and this was only the first time that he was never out doing it. It's just something that I wanted done. And so he showed me, well, all the mulch has to be taken out before you put the new in. And I realized how difficult it was. And
so I ended up going out there helping rake out the mulch and help put in the new mulch. And Joel and Nate at this point were like 7 and 8 years old, and they're like half passed out in the flower bed. And I'm like, honey, you got to give the kids a break. She's laughing because she can drive the kids hard. And it's not
I'm not mean about it.
It's not in a mean or cruel way. It's just that, again, it's this aspect of you don't know what's inside of you until you push yourself to your limits.
Or your wife pushes you to your limits.
Yeah.
Right. Or your husband pushes you.
She did that day.
That's for sure.
I'd find him off in the pool, and what are you doing in the pool? Get out. Come on. We're not done. And by about 2:00, he goes, okay, none of us have eaten. Send the boys inside, and you go and you just go get some fast food. And I came back, and he was out there until 8:00 working, and I felt so bad.
Wow.
So we never did that again. But whenever we say yard day, they would get pretty nervous. Like, what are you going to have us? Yeah, it was a big trigger.
How long is it going to be? Well, last time you said it was going to be 2 hours, so it's 6.
Yeah.
The point is that when it comes to like the Ironman triathlon, okay, 2.4 mile swim, 112 mile bike, 26.2 mile marathon. You start at 7:00 in the morning. You got to be done by midnight. You come to the end of your physical ability, and you still have to perform. You know, our boys saw that, and so it forces you to find that next level of mental toughness to keep pushing, keep going. And I've seen that in business, in life. In marriage. It's and so we've sought to instill that in our kids of like, you can do more than what you're doing. Like to the whole thing with schooling, right? It's not about you need to get straight A's, but I know you.
I know what's in there.
I know you're capable of more than you're giving.
Yeah.
And it's not control, it's not manipulation. It's calling forth from your child the best of them.
I want to give a shout out to one of my clients. You remember what you were going to talk about though?
About Jake leaving home.
Okay. I've got some clients in Texas, and this is a shout out to the Maddox family. So this is cool. One of the things that I've worked with them on is in the back of my book is an exercise called the core values exercise. And you go through as a family and you identify what your core values are. And they were sharing this at the mastermind event in Punta Cana.
I remember this.
That one of their words for their core 5 was the word perseverance. And they've got 4 kids under age 5. And the wife was Anna was saying, well, how do you convey the word perseverance to 4-year-olds? And so they came up with the phrase is we do hard things. And so when she was doing some exercises and she was feeling like quitting, the little girl was like, Mama, we're Maddoxes and we do hard things. So they're beginning to instill in these little kids.
Yeah, that is.
Isn't it?
That's great.
Instilling in kids. It's like people are like, well, my 4, they're not going to get it, so I'm going to wait. This young family is figuring out, you know what, we may not be able to explain what perseverance means, but these little girls understand that we are Maddoxes and we do hard things.
Yeah.
Isn't that cool?
The power of modeling.
Yes.
The power of modeling it for your kids is it's integral. It's the opposite of do as I say, not as I do.
Yes, it is. Yeah, I love that.
Good.
Okay, let's shift. Since we are an Empty Nest podcast.
Yeah.
You kind of have, I mentioned the other day, I felt like you guys have one foot in empty nest land and one at home, but just because you have 2 of your 3 boys still living at home, how did it feel? Like what were the hard places you found yourself, if any, in when Jake left home, since he is your first? Did you sail through empty nest? Was it non-existent because you still have kids at home? How did you deal with that?
It was extremely hard when he moved. He was talking about just moving out into an apartment, and that was hard for me, being still in the same town. But then shortly after that, when he got the job, he says, well, I'm moving to Tennessee. And that was hard, but we were super happy for him. So we were definitely very encouraging, supportive of him when he left, but I was heartbroken. I cried a lot. We came up here to see his place like a couple weeks later, and It was very difficult. But I didn't let him see me cry. I didn't let him see I didn't let him see what I was going through the first couple of years that he was gone. Because I didn't want to make him feel guilty. I didn't want to put those feelings on him. But at home, I was definitely having to deal with my emotions and not just staying in a place of, like, I could have stayed depressed or, really curl up in a ball and then ignore my other children, my other two boys that were home. And I knew that I couldn't do that. But it was, we talked a lot about things. I just would have to work through things, take things to the Lord. And not.
It was tough. It was definitely tough.
Yeah, it definitely was tough.
We would put on a good face for Jake.
Yeah.
Because we didn't want to be the parent that tried to make the kid feel guilty for not being home or for moving away and any of that. We wanted him to flourish.
Yes.
And so for me, I had to play strong for her, but the truth was he was
hard for you
one
too.
of my closest friends.
Yeah. Yeah.
Because when they reach adulthood, you need to stop being dad as the authority, and you need to come alongside as a friend. And he was one of my closest friends, and I love him, and I respected him, and I admired him and for who he was becoming as a man and as a follower of the Lord. And it was so hard for me to not be there. And then he's got other people that are coming around him that he's now being mentored by, and it's like, do you not need your dad anymore? And it was like, oh, that was so hard. And I couldn't say anything because I didn't want him to feel like he was obligated to call his dad to get advice on life when he was able to have it from other people. But she was so, oh man, there was so many times that she'd take him to the airport and drop him off, or we would take him to the airport and drop him off. Because I would always let her go if we couldn't both go. I would not take him because I knew she wanted.
It was me. Yeah.
Well, because I wanted her to have the last every minute possible with Jake, because it was that hard for her. But she always kept it from him because she didn't want him to feel bad. But when we would go, as soon as we wouldn't even get out of the airport, and she's bawling. She's like, I can tell he's going through something right now. I just don't know how to help him. It was hard. It was real. And I know that when Joel, who will probably be our next one to moves out, it's going to be really hard. And then when the youngest, oh my word.
And then it's full on empty nest with Naked Saturdays. Sometimes that's not enough to make you happy. So,
I know it's hard because we don't do a lot of things because our boys, they are both driving, they're done with high school. They're, Joel's already forming his path with his career, and our youngest started barber school. He finished school early. And so we don't see them a whole lot. We have to be intentional to say we're doing a family day today.
Yeah.
Because otherwise, we leave church and they're off until 10 o'clock, just doing their thing. And we actually just had a talk about this on Mother's Day of we need to be more intentional because I don't know how much time is left. And, that's why I love family vacations of, I know that they'll continue, but you don't know how often you'll get to go when they're married and just have it be everybody. Of course, you want that to be all the time. At least I do.
Yeah.
But I certainly don't want to make it a demand.
Sure.
Because
it is hard. The reality is hard to get everybody on scheduling on the same page at the same time to go somewhere. So I feel like at times I have, like I'm already going through grief because I'll say things to Steve about it. And even when they were in high school, I remember dropping Jake off at high school sometimes and I'd tear up just driving away because I said, it's going to go by too fast. Yeah. And it really did. And there's something about your first. Yeah. I know it's like, as a mom, and tell me if you can resonate with this. Like I love all my kids. I don't have a favorite. Yeah. But that first one, you go through so many things with that kid, that there's something so prolific when they leave. And I know, you know, with our son, like I love his wife. Like he even mentioned the other day, if something ever happened to me or if I did something stupid and messed everything up, I know you guys would side with Lindsay, you know, and I didn't really argue with him, but you know, like I know, like with Jake and Heather, like that feeling, there's something comforting knowing that, you know, your son is married to the love of his life and she becomes the love of your life too, you know?
Yes. And that's something I prayed for. I've prayed for all my boys.
Yes.
Just different things that God would give me. Not what I want, but God would just give me things for all of them. And Jake married the best person ever. I love her.
Yeah.
And so she checked off everything off the checklist and more. And I knew she was the one when they were friends. But
so we have a list, though. There is a checklist.
Well, kind of in my brain. I haven't written it down, but just things that I know to pray for my sons and just look out for those things. So,
I love that.
yeah, I'm super grateful because I knew that I thought, wow, it's going to be really hard to get to know my daughter-in-law with Jake being in a different state. And so I'd pray about that too. And it was just so neat that they were best friends for so long and that she came down for the holidays. So I got to know her. And then
So something just clicked. Like father, like son.
yes. Well,
It took a while for the light to click on.
yes, we would say things to him, but he wouldn't, you know, he wouldn't want to hear it. He's like, yeah, well, that's you guys, but that's not me. And
Yeah.
So that was nice that when they did call and say they were finally together, you know, it's just having that peace, knowing that he's with someone that's going to take care of him really, really well.
Yeah.
And he needs it.
Yes, like I knew exactly that what he needed, and they're doing great.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
That is cool.
yeah,
I love that.
Yeah.
I love that. And I love that I feel like you haven't let empty nest or kids leaving home cause a strain on your marriage. Like I know one of the things I admire about y'all is you pour back into marriages by mentoring younger couples.
Yeah.
And I think that's so significant because a lot of times people reach empty nest and they don't know, like, what am I supposed to do? What do I do with my life
What's
now?
the purpose?
Yeah. What's my purpose? And I feel like you guys you're walking out your purpose even before you have no chicks in the nest anymore.
Right.
You know?
Yeah, it's been great being able to mentor these couples and get to know. Like I didn't have any daughters, and I've got daughters that look to me as their spiritual mom.
Yeah.
And just being able to pour into their life and mentor them and tell them, you've got this, you can do this. And I feel like this is our next season because that's what we've been doing. And trying to, it was hard because I'm not taking the kids to school. I'm not doing all these things. They are able to drive. And then I would ask the questions like, well, what's my purpose? And it would put me into depression at times because I felt like, well, what am I doing? I've got more time on my hands and I don't want to just not be doing nothing. But
So there's two things that I want to say. One is that when we were married, not when we were, but as we have
we're still
gone through
married.
the years of marriage, exactly. But we always made our marriage the first priority.
Yeah.
We did not put our kids before our marriage. And because of that, our marriage has stayed strong despite the changes in the kids that are living at home. And then, you know, for her, she's has said to me many times over the years, what's my purpose? What's my purpose? And I would say to her with tears in my eyes, why do you think our boys are the way they are?
Yeah.
Because you have been their mom. You've been driving them to school. You've been a stay-at-home wife and homemaker, and you've modeled for them what a godly wife looks like.
Yeah.
What greater calling than to raise up the next generation, right? And so, you know, I'm blessed because of the fact that we have three amazing boys, and she'll tell everybody, well, Steve was this and Steve was this and he did these things and he paid the price here and blah blah blah. And I look at where she's done the exact same thing, and it takes it really takes both.
Yeah, it does.
It does.
You know,
Well, it sounds like too. There's just a consistent communication. So I am curious about what do you do as far as being intentional about either quality time, staying on the same page, the communication piece. What do you do to make sure that that part of your marriage stays intact?
Do you still do your triathlons together?
No, but we still work out and stuff. But yeah.
but we so we do a weekly check-in where we just sit down and be like, okay, how are we doing? How's our communication? How's our intimacy? How is this? How is that? How are the different aspects? Are there any issues that we need to talk about? You know, and we do that every week.
Is it like a on the calendar? Is it like a date night? Is it a Friday at
No,
3
not-
o'clock?
It's on the calendar, but a lot of times those check-ins will just happen spontaneously where we'll be, you know, hey, let's go out for dinner tonight. You know,
Okay.
and we absolutely do date nights.
We do. We have so much time together because, like I said, the boys aren't always home. So if we're home, we're communicating. We communicate every single night, unless we have something going on. Then obviously not. But we do end up having a good amount of time together. So that's usually when we would have the discussion, or sometimes it would just come up,
Okay.
things that we need to talk about.
But to your, because I think I may know where you're going, and if I don't, you can, but I still think what I'm going to say is important. It's this aspect of being willing to be corrected, staying teachable. Because there are times where she's like, we were talking on Mother's Day, and it's like, it would have been great when we got rained out with going out on a boat if you had just said, we're going to go do this, instead of looking to me to figure out what I want to do instead. And I was like, okay, so that's something I need to do differently, you know,
Yeah.
30 years later.
Right.
You know,
You didn't get defensive? When
No,
it didn't
he
cause
didn't.
a fight?
No.
I've learned that it doesn't help to be defensive. You know,
Never.
because
It can happen, but
yeah,
it didn't
for
happen
sure, I
on
get-
that Sunday.
for sure. But it's this, like right now, she's going through some health issues. She's bone-on-bone arthritis in both of her thumbs, and she's got a knee injury, and so she really can't cook. And so I'm working and then cooking dinner sometimes. And I'm in a season of where I have to lay my life down for my wife and serve her. And to say it more accurately, I'm in a season where I get to
Yeah.
lay my life down, because Jesus said the greatest among you will be your servant.
Yeah.
Right. And so right now I am embracing serving my wife because she needs that right now.
Yeah.
If we go back to the check-in, definitely where I was headed was you guys have gotten into a rhythm that it is just something we do. It doesn't have to be on the calendar, doesn't have to be scheduled. I would like to encourage those that are watching this that it's not a rhythm, that they become so intentional with it until it becomes second nature that they do get it on a calendar. Because what I've learned is if it's important enough to me to get started and to do it on a consistent basis, it's going to find a way onto my calendar. That way it doesn't slip through the cracks. I don't forget it. So I would just, from the perspective of if this is something brand new for couples, I love the idea of the weekly check-in. So while I'm talking about this, share some of the questions, or be thinking of some of the questions you can share with this group, because I want people to get it on the calendar. I want them to treat it with such high level of priority and respect that it is for the benefit of you and your spouse. Let's not leave it to chance that we're just going to wing it. So with that thought in mind, what are some of your basic weekly check-in questions that these guys can get on the calendar?
Well, I think first off, to your point, you have to be intentional, right? As a believer, my first ministry is my wife.
Agreed.
Right? If she's my first ministry, then if she's the person who's being ministered to, I need to find out from her, where do I need to be ministering to you? You know, so she's great about this. She'll ask me, one question is, how can I be praying for you? That's a big question that she's great for asking. I am not as great at asking because she's more of a prayer warrior than I am. I'll ask her, how are we doing in our communication? where are things that I could be doing better? You know, what are some questions that you can think of?
Well, we'll ask how our intimacy is doing. And then also like scheduling things of getaways, because we like to go away, a few times a year, if it's a weekend or a week. And so we like to get things on the calendar for that. I mean, that's not every week. Maybe like upcoming things of things that we can do. That would be fun. People to get together with.
Yeah, that's
another thing.
Yeah, who in our circle do we want to spend time with?
Yeah.
That's a definite one.
So it's very similar to, I don't know if you guys have seen what we call the First Friday discussion guide. Have y'all seen that? All right, we'll get it to you. It's actually in the show notes on the bottom of it, but it's something that we've been doing for well over 20 years. But we only do it once a month. That's that intentional, but it's calendared on the very first Friday. It's a real creative name, but first Friday of every month.
It's memorable.
For
guys like us with our memory problems,
right?
It's helpful.
At our age. But it's got just some basic questions of things to ask. And one of them is definitely what couples do we want to be spending more time with? One of the other ones is, who are some couples that we probably need to limit our time with? Because you don't want to, everyone's worth investing in, but some people, I'm just going to say it, they're life suckers. They'll just suck the life right out of you. Can we cut that? That probably shouldn't have been said. Anyway, any thoughts on?
But to your point, though, about are there couples that we need to be spending less time with? Again, it comes down to this aspect of being intentional.
Yeah.
If I'm pouring into your life, if we're pouring into a married couple's life and they're not doing anything with what we're trying to come alongside and help them with, I'm going to pull back. And if they come to me and say, hey, what do we do about this? Well, what did we say last time? Right? What was the advice? Have you taken action on what we've already talked about?
Yeah.
Well, no. Well, then you need to go back and do that. And then when you've done that for a few weeks, let's have a check-in then.
Yeah.
Right? You're smiling because you know exactly what I'm talking about.
Not only have we done it, but I keep thinking about, that's why John Maxwell, he used to be a pastor, but he said he was the world's worst counselor because he would give people direction or advice on things to do. And when they would come back and not do it, he was like, I'm done. He just got tired of counseling people that would not follow through on anything that he asked them to do.
Well, and I think even for the couples that don't mentor, are not in place of mentoring, people.
Or in the right culture. That's good.
Yeah, I think there's a time limitation. Sometimes, like I know for us, the margin in my life has gotten a lot smaller because you keep dragging me into doing podcasts and all the things that,
and
we're doing.
And workshops
and
grandkids.
Well, I am not setting grandbabies aside. Like that is my, that's my thing. And then we've got church stuff. And so sometimes time is limited. You can only do what you can do.
Right.
And there are some couples or some relationships that tend to fall by the wayside because you don't have time to spend with them. And, you want to spend time with, even they're not people that are like life suckers. They're people that would be fun to hang out with. But
and when you identify your inner circle group and you then have tenure with them, whether it's months or years, those are the easiest relationships.
They are.
Because, there are times an impromptu, we'll reach out to our inner circle group. And then one of the things she'll say, I'm not wearing makeup.
I'm like, come comfy.
Yeah.
And they know that means
not,
I'm not putting makeup on. I will not have a stitch of makeup on. And I might look homeless. But,
and they'll show up
we'll
the
have
same.
drinks on the patio. So,
You're just comfortable that way. Yeah.
I like that.
yeah. So there is a comfortability.
Yeah.
So, well, I just want to say thank you for being here and being on the podcast. But I also want to thank you just for being a stellar couple.
Yeah.
Like that you've put the work in, you've done the things, and it's not just work, it's you've listened to Holy Spirit through the years, and you've determined to be a trailblazer, and you've changed the path of your family, and that is like, hats off to you. Like that's
Thank you.
That's amazing. So
Thank you for having us on the show.
Yes, thank you.
Yeah.
well, it's been an honor.
It has.
It's been an honor. So
And I know the road is not done, right? You've got 2 more that are be coming up. Love the way you worded it, though. We'll always be their parents, but we're no longer parenting.
yeah.
Right.
You know, when we
So
become alongside them as friends, they will always have points of asking questions, right? Our youngest is 31, and I still have a weekly quote business meeting with him. That was one of the calls
It's
from
not
this
a business
morning.
meeting. You guys just like to chew the fat. over
We
Zoom.
talk.
Yeah.
No, it's both. It's business, and now he's been married right at a year. But it's one of those things that it's an honor to be
yeah.
invited into that call.
Yeah.
And so your road's not done. Your responsibilities aren't done. Your purpose isn't done. The fact that you're investing in all 3 of your boys, even though one is out and married on his own, he's got a new handler that has a full-time job. But and then the other couples that you're continuing to invest in, I always tell people that there is a difference between experiential knowledge and theoretical knowledge. And theoretical knowledge isn't wrong, but it doesn't have the power and the impact that experiential knowledge carries.
Yeah.
Right.
That's a big deal.
Yeah. So kudos to you for living well and being willing to invest in other couples through the experiences that you've walked through.
Thank you.
Thank you. It's been an honor to be here with you
It
guys.
has.
And thank you for opening up your home to us and letting us share with you guys. It's been great.
Yes.
Love it.
We loved it.
Yeah.
All right. That's it. Welch out.